am very excited to see so many familiar faces here to meet one of the superstars at Columbia Business School, Henry Kravis, in this fireside chat on entrepreneurship. So a little bit of introduction. I know we mostly basically want to hear from him. I'm Jorge Guzman. I am the Gancher Associate Professor of Business. I research entrepreneurship, and I'm also the faculty co-director along with Angela Lee of the Lang Entrepreneurship Center. Mr. Kravis, he's a big benefactor to the school. He's also a top entrepreneur in the finance industry, creating KKR, and just a legend in the world of finance. So thank you for your time, and we're very excited to have you here.
Nice to be here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I like to start thinking about the entrepreneur journey. And one of the things that we know about entrepreneurship when we teach it is that it really depends on that initial moment of taking a leap. And so when I was reading back on how KKR started, one of the few things that surprised me, you were doing a bet on a completely new idea, taking a risk by yourself and with, and others in your family taking a risk. So take us back to that initial moment. How do you know that it was worth taking a risk that would be kind of personal investment?
So first of all, thank you very much. I'm sure you all have important things to do, but I really appreciate your giving us this hour to be here. And I want to thank all of you first for sharing the time with us. Look, I think back on Friday, this coming Friday, we'll be 50 years old as a firm. And I started the firm with George Roberts, my first cousin, and Jerry Kohlberg. Jerry was 19 years older than George and I were each 32 years old. And George and I had, as Jorge said, we had 3 children each. I had no money. I put up $10,000 to start KKR. George did the same. That's all the money he had. And Jerry had a little money, and he put up 100. So we started this firm with $120,000. Now, we had been doing what is now known, I'll use this term for now, private equity. At the time, it was called bootstrap acquisitions. No one was doing what we love doing. And the reason we started doing it was because we saw a real opportunity where you have an alignment between management and the owners. And it used to be in those days, in the 70s in particular, 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s, well into the 80s, it was, I'll be on your board and you'll be on my board. We're good friends. We play golf together every weekend. We won't ask too many questions of each other, and life sort of goes on. There was no real alignment of interest between the owners and the management. You didn't have the activist shareholders in those days. You didn't have institutions that were really willing to speak up and if the company wasn't doing well. And we had this idea that if we could have an alignment of interest between management and the shareholders and have the management put up some money, some real money. We don't want them to mortgage their family. We don't want to mortgage their house. We want to put up something where if they lost it, would be a huge impact on their life. And so that was the hook to get the management and they'd get stock for doing that. So we had this idea. We'd go out, we'd raise a $25 million fund. Now I'll let you in on a little inside baseball for a minute. And that is that we actually went to the senior partner at Bear Stearns. And you have to understand, Bear Stearns never put a penny into any deal we did while we were at Bear Stearns. And we did about probably 10 or 12 deals while we were at Bear Stearns under this bootstrap acquisition approach. They never put a penny in. And we basically had to go to the insurance companies to put up, they'd take a strip, they'd take senior debt, subordinated debt, and most of the equity, put the money up for it. So we said to them, to Cy Lewis, the senior partner, we'd like to just do private equity within Bear Stearns. Now, I understand Bear Stearns at the time was a sales and trading firm, basically a small corporate finance area, which we came out of. And he said, you're either here doing what we want or you're out. So that made our decision pretty easy as to what we wanted to do. And so we, 2 days later, we handed in our resignation. All three of us were part of the partnership at Bear Stearns, and we resigned. Now, there we are. We went out to raise a $25 million fund, and we could not raise a $25 million fund on terms that made sense. Actually, the first person we called was a man named Henry Hillman, who had put the money up to start Kleiner Perkins. And I'd read an article, this was about 3 months before. So I called him, I said, we'd like to come see him. And he didn't know what we were doing. And we go down, met with him, had a great meeting. And 7 or 8 days later, his right-hand man called me and he said, we really like you. We'd like to take half your fund. So I'm excited. I said, wow. $12 million, $12.5 million out of 25, we're on our way. And we didn't know who to go to next. So we go to the Prudential and Mass Mutual that had been financing our deals one off. And they said, we'll finance you. We'll take the other $12.5 million, but we want to be the investment committee. And being good entrepreneurs, we did not want to be working for the Prudential because we knew how that worked. They got up on the wrong side of the bed, that investment committee there, they could turn you down for no real reason. So we said no. So there we are. Now, what does an entrepreneur do? An entrepreneur is either going to get over the wall or through the wall, but they will get to the other side somehow. And so George Roberts and I went to a steak restaurant in New York, it used to be called Joe and Rose. And we're not feeling great because we've got, as you said, Jorge, we got 3 children, no money, and now no job. So we said, okay, let's figure out how we can get started. How much is it going to take to run KKR for 1 year? Held our finger in the air, and that's basically the science that we came up with, and we figured $500,000 is what it would take. 2 offices. George would be in California, and Jerry and I in New York. So, fine. We said, why don't we go to 8 individuals? Because now you got to think about, okay, how do you at least get started and can survive for 5 years? Because you got to take the attitude, if I can raise the money, luck will follow. And if we can't do some deals in 5 years, we don't deserve to be on our own. So we went out and found 8 people to put up $50,000 each. That's $400,000. The other $100,000, we figured if we bought a company, we'd get a fee for doing it, and that'd be our contribution to overhead. And we said to those people, you have to put up $50,000 a year for 5 years, but what you're getting in return for that is you're getting to see every deal we do. You can come in or not come in. It's your choice. Whatever you want to do, you can come in. And then we said, well, if they come in, we've got to figure out how to get part of the profit. There was no such thing as carried interest and at that time. The only thing that George and I knew was the oil and gas business because George's father was an independent oil and gas operator. My father was a petroleum engineer. And in the oil and gas business, there was something called a third for a quarter, which meant that if I went to any one of you and I said, I want to drill a well, I've got a lease on some property, I'll put up 25% of the money, but I want a 1/3 interest in this well from $1. You put up 75%, but you're only going to get 2/3 of the cash flow. I'll put up 25% of the money, and I'll get a 1/3 interest in the cash flow. It was standard in the oil and gas business at that time. It was called a third for a quarter. So that was really how we thought we could do it. Well, we finished our drink at dinner, and we said, well, that's a great idea, except we got one problem. We don't have 25% of the money to put up. We have no money. So we said, okay, what does it sound like? Now, we were just trying to get started. And you're an entrepreneur, you're going to get started one way or the other. And we said, okay, let's pick 20%. We picked 20%, and that stuck. I'm often asked by people in private equity and venture funds and so on, Why didn't you pick 25%? That would have stuck. I said, well, that's easy for you to say, but we were just trying to get started, and you didn't have 3 kids and no money, and no job. So that's really how we got started. Real entrepreneurial spirit. We didn't know if it would work or it wouldn't, but we were determined. And I want to tell you one piece of this that's really important. The first conversation that Jerry, George, and I had together was how to divide the economics. That was about a 35-second conversation. Jerry, you take 40%. George and I'll take 30 each. The first 10 points that we'll give up for others in the firm as we bring people in will come from you, Jerry, until we're even. We'll come down together. No problem. Second conversation was the most important conversation to this date that we've had. And that was, what kind of culture do we want to have? What kind of value system do we want? Now, we came out of Bear Stearns, which was very much an eat what you kill culture. Everybody ran around and said, that's my idea, that's my deal. We didn't want a my, we wanted a we. And we wanted it set up in such a way that whether you brought a deal into the firm or not, whether you worked on a deal or not, you were going to get to participate in the carried interest and the fee income, which is all we had at that time to offer. And so that's exactly what we did. Now, fast forward, we've got 38 offices around the world. We have gone from 3 people to about 5,000 employees at KKR. We've got 45 products, which range all the way from private equity to growth equity to climate fund to ESG impact fund. We've got a real estate business. We've got big credit business, which is our largest business, that every kind of credit product you can imagine. We have an insurance company called Global Atlantic, an insurance and annuity business. And we have a capital markets business, and we've got a very fast-growing infrastructure business. So, but we have today exactly the same culture that we started with 50 years ago. And that is, everyone is paid off the balance sheet. Everybody participates, and we say this is a team sport. Everybody is in it together. Nobody runs around and says, that's my idea, that's my deal. No, not at all. We've had people at the firm, made us a lot of money, couldn't live by that culture. We let them go. They never got promoted to partner, even though they made us a ton of money, because you'll ruin a firm. And I'm often asked by venture people, okay, what's the one piece of advice you would offer to me? I said, build a culture. I'm not going to tell you what your culture should be, but build a culture and live by it. Hire by it and talk about it constantly.
That's fascinating. I find it, one of the things we often teach so much, just the same in entrepreneurial strategy, it's that it is the founder that sets what the organization of the company is going to be. And the other thing that comes through, that we talk about a lot, that comes through in the way you're talking about things, is a certain optimism, a certain kind of, you mentioned, I wrote it down, you have to believe that if you can raise the money, luck will follow. You said, if you're an entrepreneur, you'll jump over the wall or through the wall. And so can you tell us a little more about the entrepreneur's personality? When you're at that moment, how do you keep that drive and optimism? Is that just innate? Is that something that you engage with for the rest of the company?
It's a great question. I think a lot of it is innate. I don't know if you can teach somebody to be a great entrepreneur, because if somebody's afraid of taking risk and they're afraid of making a mistake, you won't be an entrepreneur. You got to fail. You got to be prepared to fail. Pick yourself up and do it again. And so that was really how George and I felt about it. We were young. We wanted to have our own firm, and we said we're going to set out and we're going to do it. As you said, get over the wall. A good friend of my dad's, I used to see him after work, and we'd talk about business. He was a great investor and a great executive. And I was telling him I'm thinking of doing this with George and Jerry. I asked him what he thought, and he said, it's not what I think, it's what do you think? He said, are you prepared to fail? I said, absolutely. So he said, well, let me tell you this. Don't keep one foot on the dock and 1 foot in the boat. Either keep 2 feet on the dock and let this opportunity go by, or put both feet in the boat and row like hell. Because if you don't get across the river, you're going to go over the falls and you'll be gone. So, and he asked me, he said, what's the most important characteristic of why you want to do this? I said, 1, I love the business. Nobody was doing what's now known as private equity. But I said, more importantly, it's trust. It's the trust that I had in Jerry and George. And trust to me was really tantamount. I knew that I'd be with great partners. I knew that they had exactly the same value system that I had, that I worked off of. I knew that they wanted the same culture that I wanted at the firm, where everybody participated together. And we really built a team. And I said, that's why I'm prepared to do it. But you have to be, one of the things I think is the hardest thing to do is to teach students and others how to take risk.
Mm.
What does risk mean? And how do you measure risk? Somebody once told me, he said, you know, if you only focus on the downside, don't focus on how much money you think you might make. If you're going to make an investment, think about how much could I lose if this investment doesn't work out. Because you're probably always going to make money.
It's fascinating because you have both sides. You say, you know, you have to keep the optimism and keep pushing forward, and at the same time, really protect your downside, right? And have be somewhat prudent in how you're thinking about it. And in some sense, the way I always think about it is that the drive comes from within, but the MBA teaches you how to make sure you can do all the analysis to make sure all that downside is protected to some extent.
Well, you got to. I mean, that's part of investing, obviously. And, you know, each kind of investing is different. If you're a debt investor, that's one form of risk. If you're a venture capital investor, that's a different kind of risk. That's a real, let's say, startup. There, you're only doing, you know, seed financing and so forth. That's a different kind of investor. And so you want to be an infrastructure, probably less risk in that type of investment. So there's not one risk fits all. It's what is the risk for the opportunity.
Oh, I see. And then the other thing that comes through when you mention culture, I remember one time at KKR that I was visiting Alan Levine for a presentation he had here, and there was this sign called, he mentioned that there was a sign that said arrogance kills at KKR. I was just curious if you could tell us a little bit about that sign and where does that come from and how ingrained it is in KKR culture?
So this is a sign behind my desk that I've kept there. My former assistant, who I had for 25 years, she heard me say so many times, arrogance kills. And it does. I've seen more people that are really arrogant. And I asked myself, why the hell are they so arrogant? They haven't done anything. And even if they had done something, so what? You know, big deal. And the one thing that I'm probably really proud of at KKR, we don't have arrogant people. That won't last at KKR. We have, being humble is really a sign of what we're all about at the firm. So what happened was, she heard me say this so many times at Christmas. She had a nice little sign made up with lithography, and she had it framed, and she gave it to me. And that sign is behind my desk, and it's one of our sayings at KKR, that arrogance kills. And it does. I've just seen more people blow up because they were really arrogant. And, you know, we all put our pants on the same way every morning, and we're all human beings. And, you know, you got to, one of the things, and it sort of ties a little bit to arrogance. If you stop learning and you think, oh, I've got all the answers, that's arrogant, and that'll kill you. Because I guarantee you, I don't care who you are, none of us have all the answers. Even ChatGPT doesn't get it right half the time, as we know. So one of the things I'd say all students, and I say to people, I said to our younger people at KKR, unless you're curious, you can't be, God bless you, you can't be a great investor. You have to be a curious person. And what I mean by that, I'm talking about curious about a lot of things. Too many people today are too narrow in their thinking. So if I took any of you to the window of my office, which is on the 77th floor at Hudson Yards, and I said to you, so what do you see out there? Oh God, this is a trick question. And they're looking and they're looking. Oh, I see the tugboat in the Hudson River. I said, well, you failed. I want you to say, I look out here and I see nothing but opportunity. You've got to see the whole landscape. How many of you think about this? I can tell you at KKR, it's a low percentage. We used to put art, because I own all the art with my wife at KKR in New York. We have 7 floors of art, but we used to put art in everybody's office. And I'm willing to make a bet that if I took them out of their office and I said, you can't go back in. Now tell me, describe the painting in your office. Tell me the name of the artist and a little bit about it. They'd fail. Because they don't, they sort of look, but they don't see. And you've got to have your eyes wide open. You have to have the aperture wide. Too many people, it's just very, very narrow. You got to see the whole, you got to see all of opportunities. Look at a table sometime. And it'll draw you to one place setting, or it'll draw you to a glass that's on the table. No. You want to look at the whole table. You got to be able to see the whole table. What are the opportunities on that table? And that curiosity, to me, is the number one thing to be a successful investor.
I agree it connects, because when you have curiosity, you're observing the world and you sort of approach it with some humility, right? You're just there to take it in. And as you said, if you're so focused on your story to some extent and just pushing it so hard that you don't even see the wall that has been right next to your office, you really sort of miss out on the new opportunities and maybe the new connections that one would make. Now, besides...
Well, wait, before we go off, along those lines, I think one other really important thing, be a good listener. You've got more ears than you have mouth. Just remember that.
For a reason.
For most people.
So now and just to kind of use that as a pivot, right? The other thing that comes to mind then is that the finance industry it has many big egos, and so sort of tied to those big egos is a grueling schedule that rewards sort of a certain level of drive that sometimes people think that it's sort of like that those two things kind of end up being related. Now, in kind of reading up for this, I was amazed at how many references were to your family and how much you love them, as well as the story of kind of co-founding with your cousin. And so, could we take? How do you think about family in how do you approach it as being a sort of a very successful finance professional?
Family comes first. We start with that. I'm often asked, when I do these fireside chats and these lightning rounds I like to do sometimes, they'll say, okay, if you could have dinner with anyone, they usually say living or dead, and I don't want to have somebody dead. So, but that's a strange question. But it's easy. And I say it's my wife. And I mean that. She's, about 10 times smarter at least than I am. And, she's got a PhD in economics. She went to college at age 14. She's gone on, done all sorts of things. And so that's my favorite. And I say to people, it shouldn't be a day in your life. You go to business or whatever you're going to do. It could be in the not-for-profit sector. It could be in the for-profit sector. Every day you go, make it a happy day for you. Make it say, I'm excited to go to work. But conversely, if you have a partner at home, make it just as happy you want to go home. And you're going to be a happy person. And I'll tell you from experience, that's the way my life is. And so I'm lucky. I've got 2 children. I had 3. I lost one son in 1991, a car accident at age 19. But got to make a decision at that point. He would hate it, my stopping and just, sort of dwell on that. And you got to look forward. And so, I did. My other two children are fantastic. I've got a son, a daughter, and they're both in their 50s. And I've got 6 grandchildren. And I love watching what they're doing. And I can't talk them out of where they want to go to college, but I try. They go to Harvard. I don't know why. But no, it's fun. I love watching what they're doing and their growth trajectory they take. But family to me is really important. George and I are, we met at age 2. Our families were very close. His father, my mother were brother and sister. And often ask, well, you two must fight a lot. You've been co-CEOs, co-founder of KKR. We were co-CEOs for 45 years together. And I said, oh, yeah, fight. I said, the last fight we had, we both were 7. And he came up to Tulsa for Christmas with his family, and I'd gotten a brand new bicycle, and he wanted to ride my bike first. I wanted to ride the bike first. I got chased in the house, and I ran in the corner of a wall, and I cracked my head open. I had 26 stitches. That's the last fight we've ever had. So we don't fight. We don't agree on everything, and that's good. I mean, it'd be terrible if we agreed on everything. But we talk it out. We're not going to get in a big fight. We'll talk it out. And if I can't convince him or he can't convince me, that's great. We're not going to do it then. And, you're in it together. It's interesting. One of the things is often written is, well, 2 people can't run a company successfully. Well, we seem to have done okay. And we picked 2 more people that are now co-CEOs at KKR. And if you have the same goals in mind and you don't worry about who gets credit for something, it's amazing how far you can go. You're not trying to edge the other person out. And George and I, from day one, had exactly the same equity ownership, exactly the same pay. And when Joe Bay and Scott Nuttall, we made them co-CEOs, the first thing they said, pay us the same no matter what. And so, what are the things that get in way and disrupt relationships? I can name 2. I'm not sure what a third one might be, but it's sex and money, and that gets in the way. And if you've got same objectives, same values, because values are really important, and you're not trying to outdo the other one, but you're pulling for your partner constantly because you're in it together. You can go a very long way, and that's exactly how we operate. I'm deviating from your question a little bit, but that's how George and I have worked. We're first cousins, best friends. I mean, other than my wife, he is absolutely my best friend, has been from day one practically, and we just hit it off. We went to Claremont McKenna College together. We just had some fun. We were out there in California over the weekend, and we did a fireside chat together they had a big event there because the president's retiring, and so they asked us to come be the keynote speaker. We both had gone there, and we did. And that was great fun to do. I always love being on stage with him. And but we were in college together. In the summers, we drive cross country from California to New York. He worked at Bear Stearns. I worked at Goldman Sachs in the summers. And we roomed together, and it's just been one of these phenomenal investments. It's a little bit partnerships. It's a little bit like Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. They were extremely close. Charlie died last year, but that was an incredible relationship, and they built Berkshire Hathaway together.
This is actually fascinating. One of the things that comes through also in the way you're talking about it is that you didn't talk about managing your schedule. You didn't talk about how would you kind of divvy up the hours to kind of fit family and work. And I think to me, one of the things I take, and I'm curious if this is correct, is that when you frame it as 2 different things you're excited to do that day, then kind of the schedule works itself out much more easily than 2 difficult chores that one has to do that day. Then it's all about kind of it trying to figure out how to go through kind of all your activities and be done by the end of the day. What do you think about that interpretation?
Well, uh, there's certain people that think that it's really easy, working your way up a company, becoming a CEO, and at the same time being a mother or a father. And something's got to give. It is really tough, I can tell you. I know many of you will say, well, I can do both, and you will be able to do both to a level, to a certain degree. But I find, and I see this often, that something has to give. Unfortunately, in my case, I'll be very personal about this. I ended up getting divorced because I was so focused on starting KKR and building KKR, and I didn't focus enough at home initially. And so we ended up getting divorced. But I had my 3 children, and I made up my mind then, no matter what, I'd try to pick them up in the morning at school, even though I wasn't living with them. But I'd always pick them up when I could and be in town. And you have to put your priorities, and you just have to say, what's important to me? Is my job more important than anything else? If it is, fine, that's your choice. Or is my family more important? And that's your choice too. And it is hard to do both, believe me. So I don't have there's no great answer to it. It's just, I can tell you, hard to do. But it's a little bit, Jorge, like philanthropy. I try to tell everybody, pick a not-for-profit that means something to you. I don't care if you don't have any money, give your time. Find something where you can help other people. And you'd be amazed how much satisfaction you're going to get out of that. I've done that my whole life. And I remember David Rockefeller. I called him one day and I said, David, you're a great philanthropist. Would you have lunch with me? And I knew him pretty well. And he said, sure. So I said, I'm just now starting to make a little money, and I'd like your advice on philanthropy. He said, well, I'm not going to tell you where to give your money. What I'm going to tell you is whatever you do, get involved. Roll your sleeve up. Don't just write a check. Spend time. Get to know the people and really help. And I've taken the view that I want to be on and involved in organizations where I can either start something from scratch. I started the New York City Investment Fund to help inner city of New York in particular. We went out and started with $52 million. I went out, $51 million. I went to 52 corporations and I asked them to put up $1 million each, no more, no less. And I said, we've got to focus on our own backyard here. And I want to try to build a network of the businesses in New York. As I said, if we don't help our own backyard, nobody's going to do it for us. Now, how many of you go to Dinosaur Barbecue? Everybody, practically. Well, that was one we started. We gave them the money so they get started. And we were trying to create jobs. That was really what it was all about. And I didn't know how it would work, but all I knew was if we set it up like KKR, and I get enough of the corporations in New York to work together. They didn't work together. Everybody did their own thing, but nobody talked to each other, nobody helped. We were able to create a network and really help the neighborhoods and help. And I said, we don't want to put a penny into real estate because that'll basically will build, put 4 windows in a building, the amount of money we were going to raise. So we went out and we got the 51 million, 51 out of the 52 companies I met with said, well, I'll give you $1 million. And so I tell you, that was unbelievable. It was just an idea I had, but I said, let's try it. And it worked. I started a drug and substance abuse program because I was very concerned about, still am, drug and substance abuse in America. And we did a study, and it turned out, I spent 1 year, hired a team to go around the country, find the best program. It turned out that trying to train children before 5th grade was too young, and after 8th grade, probably too late. So we picked, what we did in that program is pick the middle schools. And that program became a great success, and so on. So I just encourage each and every one of you. And I know you're going to say, geez, I'm just starting out, I don't have time. Make the time. Because I didn't have the time either, but I made the time. It's like with a family. I got divorced. I wasn't happy about that. Found a great wife in Marie-José, we married now 32 years. And boy, I love spending time with her. And so you really have to make the time. And, I talk about curiosity. And I also I want to tell you one story having nothing to do with anything except being prepared. And what I came out of, I graduated from Claremont, and after my freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year, I worked at Goldman Sachs, and they wanted me to stay there and work there full time. Didn't even want me to go on. I said no. I want to try something else. I got one more year after my senior year before in those days, you went right on to business school. So I went to Columbia then. And I went to work at the Madison Fund. And one of the greatest things to happen to me was when I showed up there, Ed Merkel, who ran the Madison Fund, which was a fund not a huge fund, but in those days, pretty good mid-sized fund, $350 million of assets under management. And he used to call me kid. And he said, all right, kid, I want you to follow the following two industries. And I want you to buy stock. And one was the fast food franchise. The second one was the home furnishings. And I said, well, Mr. Merkel, I've never bought a stock in my life. He said, don't worry, you're not going to blow us up. I want to see what you can do. And you're talking about just getting lucky. And I'm positive a monkey would have done probably as well as I did, but everything I touched went up. And as I say, the monkey could have probably done just as well. So then one day he says to me, kid, I want you to go call on Tri-State Motor Transit. And I said, well, Mr. Merkel, that's not in my group. He said, I know. And so I said, who's going with me? He said, no one. So, I'm nervous. I'm a kid right out of college, undergrad, and I'm going to go call on this company. And so I go out to Joplin, Missouri, and I had all my questions written out. Guy comes to the airplane. I came in on DC-3 because that's how you got there in Joplin, Missouri from Tulsa. And I arrived, get off the plane. There's a guy there in jeans and a dirty T-shirt. So I figured, well, they sent one of the truck drivers out to pick me up because this was an irregular route heavy hauler of explosives. The Vietnam War was going on. Turns out that was the CEO of the company. So that was lesson number one. And then it turned out that I represented the first institution to ever show up at his company. So he was really excited about it. So after doing some work, I recommended we buy stock, and stock goes up. About 3 weeks later, Mr. Merkel comes to my office, and he said, all right, kid, I want you to go call on Roy Disney. That's one thing going to see Roy Disney at the Disney company. Walt, his brother, and he started the company together. Walt died in 1966, and Roy was the CEO. And I said, again, who's going with me? Now I'm really scared. One thing, I'm not a kid out of college. I'm going to go on Roy Disney. So I read everything I could read. Believe me, I read annual reports, and we had no internet then. So I read annual reports, everything was physical, research reports, you name it, footnotes and filings and so forth. I arrived at 9 o'clock in the morning, was my meeting. He said, Henry, thank you for coming out here. I have 1 hour for you. Now, if he had said I got 15 minutes, that'd have been fine too, because I am scared to death to be sitting there with this man running the Disney company. So we get talking. And he says, about halfway into the conversation, halfway into the hour, and he says, wow, you know a lot about my company. Now, the only reason I knew so much about the company, I was scared to death. He said, I'll tell you what, I told you I had an hour for you. Here's what I want. I want you to spend the day with me. I want you to go to all my meetings. And in those days, I guess the SEC didn't frown on it. He said, just go and sit there, and you're going to learn a lot. And at the end of the day, I'm going to take you on a tour of the studio. Now, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. He never once asked me, was I a partner at the Madison Fund or was I a summer trainee, which I was. I had a summer job. That's all I had there. Then, and he never asked me how old I was, nothing. All he cared about was that I knew a lot about his company. So the point of that is if you're prepared, they don't really care. You know enough about their company. You've spent the time studying their company. Because he said to me, most analysts that come out here haven't even read my annual report. They just expect me to tell them everything, so they'll go back and regurgitate it. He said, you're asking really probing questions. And so that was a lesson. I pass it on to all of you. Don't be afraid to reach out to people older than you. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. There are no dumb questions. There are just others that are maybe better than that one, but there are no dumb questions. And you're going to learn a lot from just questioning people and asking. Let me give you another piece of advice. Just because somebody, maybe is your boss, says it's this way, if it doesn't sound right, ask them. It doesn't seem right. Speak up. I love people to speak up and tell me I'm wrong. Probably 90% of the time they are right, that I was wrong. But I want to hear that. If I have all people around me that all they do is, oh, yes, Mr. Kravis, yes, Mr. Kravis, that's bad. So that's what we want. We encourage that. We want people to think out of the box. We want them to innovate. Every day that people come into the office, we try to tell them, come in and think that we're a startup, even though we're now 50 years old. And by that means come up with something new, come up with something that is different than what you've been doing. And that way we get everybody to try to help the firm. I'm sorry, I've gone on too long.
This was wonderful. The only problem is I took too many notes to reflect on. No, I really appreciate the the part about preparation because it really is once you know your stuff, it just comes through in any topic. And hopefully, I mean, when I think about the MBA program, it is we give students, amongst the many things that we give them, is the ability to know what they need to learn, to understand how they need to think through problems, how to read financial statements and reports, so they can be in the conversation. What was your time at Columbia Business School, or what do you take from your own MBA that you think students should be thinking about right now?
I had a strange experience here at the business school, so you got to understand that.
That might be more typical than you think.
I was in a marketing class my first semester, and the professor was Professor Richmond. He was a hotshot marketing professor, and he asked the class, I think the first day of class, how many of you want to go to work at Procter & Gamble? Everybody's hand went up except mine. Oh, God, I'm at the wrong school. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't want to go to work for Procter & Gamble, even though it's a great place, particularly if you wanted to be in marketing. I go home and call my father, and I said, I'm getting out of here. He says, now, why is that? I tell him the story. He said, calm down, get off the ledge, and come back in. This will help you. It's going to be really important to you going forward. He was, of course, right, and I was wrong. I was really impetuous. And so I stayed. And I had some great classes in finance in particular, but one wonderful class was a class I took in securities research. And that was using Graham and Dodd, which was a really important textbook at the time. And I don't even know if they still use it or not.
Still use it, the value investing program, I suppose, right?
Okay.
I see a lot of nods.
That to me was really important. It taught me a lot of the basics about investing. And so it was that. I actually loved my banking class. I wasn't quite sure why I liked it, but I didn't know anything about how the Federal Reserve worked. I didn't know how, bank transfers worked. I found that absolutely fascinating. Comes back a little bit to the curiosity question, just open your eyes. And the hardest course for me was, and because nobody had anything, we had punch cards, was a course you had to take in computer programming. Now, computer programming, then nobody knew anything about it. It was literally, you had punch cards, which, you gave and put that into a computer and hopefully it came out with some answer. And I remembered about 6 formulas. And I said, God, please have one of those questions fit my formula, the answer, or otherwise I'm not going to pass this course. You had to pass it. It was not an elective. That was one that everybody had to take. And it wasn't, it was just tough. It was my last exam that I had to pass. And I passed. I remember going for my, they used to post your grades on a board, and I go look up the board to see it. If I passed, thank God. That was a pass-fail course. Thank God I passed that. And so, I had a really good accounting class here, which was terrific, and that was very helpful to me. For the longest time up at Harvard, hard to believe, up at Harvard Business School, they did not have an accounting course. You had to go to MIT to take, because my daughter was up there. She went to undergrad and graduate school there. You had to go to MIT. They now have an accounting course, finally. They're catching up to Columbia.
They're catching up. One more tidbit on Graham and Dodd. Now, I teach a different class called Strategy Formulation, where we teach strategy to all MBAs. And the approach that we take is called value-based strategy. It's very coherent to sort of value-based investing. They're really sort of two sides of the same coin. So it has permeated through the curriculum a lot more. But you mentioned sorry, go ahead.
But the big difference, Hora, is that in those days, unlike today, way most businesses, it works in teams. And working in teams is really important. And in those days, it was more you just go to school and you learn on your own and sort of you have the answer yourself. And that was it. So big change. And I remember when we built these two buildings, and I worked very closely with the architect. And I remember saying to her, to all the architects that came in, architecture firms, because President Bollinger and I were chairing the committee to pick the architect. And I said, one of the things that's really important is you got flexibility. You have to have flexibility, because I guarantee you whatever we build today will not be the way business is 10 years from now or 15 years from now. And these buildings will be here a lot longer than that. So that's very much what they've done. And I said, you got to have a lot of breakout space, a lot of open space where you can work. Hence those stairs in the Kravis building and so forth. And, Liz Diller, she got it. And she was the only one. It was interesting. And we had 6 architectural firms that the committee interviewed. And we sort of finished that. And we said, where's the beef? We didn't pick any of them. We said, let's just break for 2 months and let's come back together and start again. And that's when we started again. And then we picked Liz because she got it. She understood what was needed for business flexibility going forward. It's really important.
So now looking forward, and I noticed that we're sort of a little later on the timeline than I was hoping, but I know we started a little late. So I hope it's okay with everybody if we just push the end time a little bit to get through what we're hoping to chat about, if it works on your end as well. But the last thing, thinking forward, that you're mentioning, business is not going to be the same today that it's going to be in the future. Today at Columbia Business School, the main way we process that is thinking AI is really going to change business. Mm-hmm. I know KKR has invested a lot on the data center side. I think it's more on the
picks and shovels.
It's definitely picks and shovels. I want to hear about that in AI, but also how you're thinking about AI in general and kind of the data revolution, all those spaces.
So what we chose to do pretty much as far as KKR is concerned, we do invest in some AI companies, but I could not tell you which AI company is going to work or not. I do a lot of venture investing personally, just because I've been doing that since 1998. And honestly, I've got a bunch of AI investments. I don't know if they're going to work or they won't work. Some specialized in, medical research. Some doing something else. And so I don't know which ones. But as far as KKR is concerned, we chose to more go to the picks and shovel side of the equation. And we've invested in, we basically own 5 platforms that own data centers. We have interest in over 200 data centers around the world. And that's Middle East, it's Asia, it's in the U.S. and in Europe, and it's really important because and not only just data centers, most of our data centers, big percentage of them is in cloud, because cloud will be here. I don't know where the large language models are going to be the future, or it's going to be something else that will replace that. I just don't know. I don't think anybody really knows yet. We don't know where all of this is going. But there's a reason in part, and I always say that AI doesn't have judgment. AI doesn't have wisdom. And a lot of investing really comes down to judgment, judging a person, judging maybe where an industry is going. It's a huge productivity improvement tool. Believe me, it is great. For education, it's phenomenal. For doing a lot of research, it's phenomenal and makes a huge difference. It is here to stay. It is not going away. Believe me. I don't think anybody really knows There's a great book I'm reading it now. It's a book by Sebastian Mallaby, and it's really the story of Demis Hassabis, who started DeepMind, and Demis is just won a Nobel Prize last year for what he came up with in AlphaFold protein folding. And what's really interesting is he's also come up with the computer that beat the world champion chess player. That was years ago. And then the world champion Go player, which was much more complicated. And he beat that champion, I think, 10 out of 11 times. And so I don't know where all this is going, honestly. And but you have to learn it, you have to understand it, and not be afraid of it.
But there's some things that are also staying, as you mentioned. It is not going anywhere, and there's space for picks and shovels and that kind of thing. We have two student questions scheduled, so that they're over here. And so maybe we could go through those.
Is there a microphone for? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we have Amy and Christine.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. My question is, looking back on your career, what decisions have you made early on that really meaningfully shaped how you approach investing and leadership today?
Well, decisions is sort of, I could write a book about mistakes that we've made as a firm and I've made personally. And I'd say learning from those mistakes is probably the most important thing that early on. And I always tell everybody, if you're going to make mistakes, and you will make mistakes, I promise you, I don't care what you do, you'll make mistakes. Make them early because you get a chance to recover, and so, and you learn from them. And hopefully that will hold you in good stead. I would say that one of the most important things that I've learned along the way is the power of teamwork, the power of getting everybody together and getting ideas from all of you. If I had the time, I'd love to get ideas. I'd love to turn this thing around where I get to ask the questions of all of you, because I would learn so much from that. And that idea and that ability to and willingness to do that that I've learned a lot. Secondly, don't be afraid to speak up. Oftentimes, younger people are scared to death. Oh my God, this person's so senior or whatever it is. I can't ask him or I can't talk to him. Ask the question. And as I said earlier, if you think the question, their answer made no sense, keep at it and say, well, I'm not, are you sure this is it? And so on. So I've learned a lot from just making mistakes, and I've learned a lot from asking a lot of questions, which is really, I love asking questions. That's important.
Our last question is from Christine.
Thank you so much for being here. Just wanted to echo Amy's words. Before I asked the question, I got to study at Mr. Kohlberg's economics building at Swarthmore. And terrific. I also get to study at Kravis Hall, so KKR is quite special to me. And a little bit more is I built 30 Hudson Yards with Related. So
wow.
Yeah, seems to have a special relationship here.
Wow.
But the last question we have for you is, how do you see the future of private capital investment? And what advice and where do you see the most compelling opportunities for new graduates, I'll be a graduate in May, to be creative and start their careers?
It's a tough question to answer. The first thing I'd say to you, just get in the workforce. And why I say that, too many people are looking for the perfect job. I can almost guarantee you unless you get really lucky, there is no perfect job as your, say, first full-time permanent job. Now, you've all been working between undergrad and graduate school, so I get all that. And maybe that was the perfect job and you'll go back to it and do that. But I find oftentimes students tell me, I'm looking for the perfect job. I said, there isn't a perfect job, for you, start off. A lot of people say to me, gee, I want to be in your business. I said, well, that's great. That's good. Go work for somebody, And by the way, you want to go start another private equity fund? Why? The world needs another private equity fund like a hole in the head. There are so many private equity funds. In China alone, there's over 5,000 private equity funds there, or what they call private equity funds. So I wouldn't say, go out and do that. I'm often asked, if I were not doing what I'm doing, what would I do? And I'd find one small company, and I'd buy that one small company with a group, and I'd become chairman. I'd go find the best CEO I could find, and I'd do it as a build-up, a roll-up, buy other companies and put it in there. The why I do that is that's permanent capital. And the power of compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. And you want that. Why is Berkshire Hathaway as valuable as it is? It's been the power of compounding. He never sold any companies. He didn't have to. He didn't put any debt on the businesses. He didn't pay a dividend, and he just let that cash. Today he's got, I don't know what, $250 billion or something of cash. And it's phenomenal. And the value is over $1 trillion. And so, I would say that have something, if you can, where you have permanent capital, because a fund is great. Look, you'd be crazy. Somebody says to you, I'm going to give you $100 and you get 20% of the profits, and I'm going to pay you 2% of a fee every year on that $100. Well, you'd be crazy not to take it. The problem with it is you got to go raise it every 4 or 5 years, because every 4 or 5 years, you've invested your fund and you got to go back. Whereas if you have a company and you own, and by the way, all you're getting out of that as a group is 20%. Is 20% of the profits. If you got your own company, you own 100% of that profit. And so, what I would say to do, at least that's what I would do, is find something, but start. This is a mistake too many people make. They come out of school, and now there have been great successes of people dropped out of undergraduate school. We got lots of them there, from Microsoft to you name it, and that's fine. But that's a minority. Those are the only ones you hear about. I would say to all of you is go get a job with somebody and just learn the basics. Learn how to make mistakes. Learn how to take risk, assuming you want to be on the investing side. Learn how a business runs. I found more of our younger people that come out, and we used to send them out to work for a year or two at a company, one of our portfolio companies. They come back and said, wow, I had no idea that's really how the company worked, and yet they're making recommendations. They're running models and spreadsheets and you name it, and yet they didn't even have an idea how people get paid there. So I'd urge you to if you want to be on the investing side, great, but I'd maybe go work at a company for a while, whatever it is. And then from there say, okay, I've done that. I've learned a lot. Now I want to go try something on my own. And if you do that, be prepared to fail. Because the high failure rate, there's a very high failure rate. But so what? Pick yourself up and go do it again. And just take that one sentence out of your vocabulary, and that is, I wish I had.
So what if it fails? I love that as an ending. Thank you so much. We all valued your time being here. I think we all learned a lot, and we're really, really appreciative for this time with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you.